equals E equals E equals scene. Scene equals E equals equals. The air in the boardroom of Apex Consolidated was thin and pressurized, like the atmosphere at a mountain's peak. It was an environment Lube Warren had cultivated meticulously. Sunlight, sharp and unforgiving, streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the polished chrome legs of the conference table and the obsidian gleam of his desk. It was a sterile, beautiful space designed not for comfort, but for conquest. Lube Warren sat at the head of the table, his presence a palpable force that seemed to bend the very light around him. His suit was a custom-tailored masterpiece of charcoal gray, sharp enough to cut glass. His features were just as severe as strong jaw, piercing dark eyes, and a mouth that rarely curved into a smile. He was the legendary specter of Wall Street, a man who had built an empire from nothing, and his reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded him like a storm front. He tapped a single finger on the tablet before him, the soft click echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. Your projections are optimistic, Mr. Chen. They rely on market sentiment, not strategy. The executive, a man twice Lube Warren's age, visibly paled. Mr. Liu, your foresight is unparalleled. We were merely following. Foresight doesn't deposit itself into our accounts. Lube Warren cut in, his voice low and devoid of warmth, like the snap of a closing vault. Results do. He looked around the table, his gaze sweeping over the tense faces of his senior staff. Not one of them could hold it for more than a second. I want a comprehensive acquisition strategy. Every contingency, every financial model, every potential point of failure. On my desk, he paused, letting the weight of his command settle. In 24 hours, a collective, silent intake of breath. It was an impossible deadline. Dismissed, he said, turning his attention back to his tablet as if they had already ceased to exist. The executives scrambled to their feet, gathering their papers with a rustle of anxiety and relief, and filed out of the room. The heavy glass door clicked shut, sealing him back in his silent kingdom. Only his assistant, Jian, remained, standing discreetly by the door. For a long moment, Lube Warren didn't move. The iron-clad mask of the CEO remained in place. Then, with a barely perceptible gesture, he loosened the knot of his silk tie. The shift was minuscule, but it changed the entire atmosphere. The titan of industry receded, and a man with a private burden emerged. Any news? He asked, his voice losing its cutting edge, now holding a trace of something weary. Something human. Jian stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. Sir, the private investigators are still cross-referencing birth records and school archives from that district. It's a slow process. Many records from that time are incomplete. Lube Warren stared out at the sprawling cityscape below, his reflection a ghost against the glass. He saw not the empire he had built, but a dark, rain-slick alley from 15 years ago. The smell of garbage, the sting of a scraped knee, and the terror of being a lost, helpless boy. A jade pendant, shaped like a lotus seed, he murmured. The words meant more for himself than for Jian. A small, silvery scar just above her right eyebrow. She couldn't have been more than 10. He turned from the window, his eyes locking onto his assistant's with an intensity that bordered on desperation. It's been 15 years, Jian. Find her. Jian bowed his head. I will redouble our efforts, sir. Simultaneously, miles away from the rarefied air of Apex Consolidated, Xu Womra sat in a bustling but nondescript cafe. The clatter of ceramic and the low hum of conversation a stark contrast to Lube Warren's world of silent power. She twisted a paper napkin in her lap, shredding it into a pile of white confetti. Anxiety was a live wire thrumming beneath her skin. 3 years. 3 years since her world had imploded, since her ex-fiancé, Gao Jun, and her best friend, Ling Wei, had orchestrated a betrayal so complete it had cost her not only her heart but her family's home and her father's legacy. She had fled, broken and humiliated. Now, she was back, armed with a new name in the design world, Kelly, and a plan fueled by cold, hard necessity. It's just a contract, she told herself, her gaze flicking for the 10th time toward the cafe's entrance. A means to an end. Forget love. Forget trust. Those are luxuries I can no longer afford. He and Ling Wei took everything. This is how I start taking it back. The blind date was a bizarre, last-ditch solution brokered by a distant relative, an arranged marriage to a man named Lu Boa, a man rumored to be from a powerful family, but reclusive and supposedly in poor health. His family needed a wife to fulfill a condition in a will. She needed the capital and the protection of a powerful surname to launch her counterattack. A marriage of pure convenience. A man in a sharp suit approached her table. He was not her date, she realized with a flicker of confusion, but the assistant from the photograph she'd been sent. It was Jian. Miss Xu, he said, his tone polite but impersonal. My apologies, Mr. Liu was unexpectedly detained. He asked me to finalize the arrangement on his behalf. Disappointment warred with relief. She wouldn't have to make small talk. She could get straight to the point. Xu Wanro pushed a folder she prepared across the table. Her desperation had made her efficient. This is the prenuptial agreement. It states that our assets remain separate and the marriage can be dissolved by mutual consent after 1 year. No questions asked, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She met his eyes, her own filled with a fierce, brittle resolve. The money his family promised is contingent on the marriage certificate. My time is limited. Let's proceed. Jian gave a slight, impressed nod. He hadn't expected this level of preparation. He slid a sleek black bank card across the table in return. The initial payment, as agreed. The rest will be transferred upon legal registration. She took the card. It's cool. Plastic weight feeling both like a lifeline and a millstone. Fine. Tell Mr. Liu to have his documents ready. We can register tomorrow morning. Across the street, parked in a black sedan with windows so tinted they looked like polished obsidian, Liu Bowen watched the entire exchange on a high-definition tablet. The feed was from a micro-camera on Jian's lapel. He had intended only to observe this Xu Wanro, the woman his grandfather had insisted he marry to secure the final block of family shares. He had expected someone meek, or perhaps a gold digger. He saw neither. He saw a woman with a spine of steel, her face pale but her eyes burning with a purpose that intrigued him. He listened to her brisk, no-nonsense terms, a flicker of unexpected respect stirring within him. Then, she grew frustrated with a stray strand of hair that had fallen across her forehead. She impatiently pushed it back, and for a fleeting second, the cafe's overhead light caught the skin just above her right eyebrow. It was there, a faint, silvery line. A scar. The tablet in Liu Bowen's hand nearly slipped from his grasp. The air in the car thickened, becoming as thin and pressurized as the air in his boardroom. His heart, a meticulously controlled organ, had never betrayed him in multi-billion-dollar negotiations. Hammered against his ribs, he zoomed the camera feed in on her face, his mind racing, connecting 15 years of scattered dots in a single, explosive moment. The girl from that rainy alley, the one who had given him her only steamed bun and shielded him with a flimsy, torn umbrella. The one who wore a jade pendant shaped like a lotus seed. Scene. Scene equals. The air in the hospital corridor was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and despair. Xu Wanro ran, her sneakers squeaking against the polished linoleum, each frantic slap of rubber on the floor echoing the frantic beat of her heart. The frantic call from the nursing station had been vague, a sterile request for a family member to come in and discuss her grandfather's changing situation. Dread, cold and heavy, had settled in the pit of her stomach. "Please be okay, Grandpa," she prayed, her breath catching in her throat. "Please just be a false alarm." She skidded to a halt outside his room, her hand hovering over the door, only to see Dr. Chen approaching, his face a grim, professional mask. He guided her away from the door with a gentle but firm hand on her elbow. "Miss Shu," he began, his voice low and weary. "There's been a development. Is he worse?" Wonro's voice was a raw whisper. Dr. Chen's expression was laced with a pity that made her blood run cold. "Your grandfather was discharged this morning. Your family signed the papers and discontinued his life-sustaining treatment." The words didn't compute. They were a jumble of clinical sounds that held no meaning. My family. She was his only family, the only one who had sat by his bedside for months, reading to him, holding his frail hand. "What are you talking about? Who would do that?" "Your fiancé, Mr. Liu Jing." And the Miss Ya Qingqing presented power of attorney documents, the doctor explained, his gaze softening slightly at her utter devastation. "They arranged for his transfer to a long-term palliative care facility outside the city. It was all quite sudden." Shock gave way to a blinding, roaring disbelief. Liu Jing and Ya Qingqing, her best friend. The sterile white walls of the corridor seemed to press in on her, squeezing the air from her lungs. The doctor was still speaking, but the sound was a distant hum, drowned out by the thunder in her ears. She turned and fled, not knowing where she was going, only that she had to get home, to her grandfather's home. The taxi ride was a blur of rain-streaked city lights. When she finally stumbled out onto the familiar tree-lined street, the sight that greeted her stole what little breath she had left. A sleek black sedan Liu Jing's car was parked in the driveway. Movers were carrying furniture out of her front door, her family's heirlooms wrapped in plastic and destined for a storage truck. And there, on the porch, stood Liu Jing, looking immaculate in a tailored suit, his arm wrapped possessively around Ya Qingqing's waist. Qingqing, dressed in a chic trench coat, leaned into him, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. They looked like the proud new owners of a home they had just conquered. "What is this?" Wonro's voice cracked, raw with fury and anguish. "Liu Jing, what have you done? Where is my grandfather?" Liu Jing's expression was one of mild annoyance, as if she were a fly he had to swat away. "Wonro, be reasonable. The man was a vegetable. We were pouring money into a black hole keeping him in that expensive hospital room. He is not a vegetable," she shrieked, tears of rage finally breaking free. "He's my grandfather. You had no right." Ya Qingqing laughed, a sound as sharp and cruel as shattering glass. She patted Liu Jing's chest, her eyes glinting with venomous delight as she looked Wonro up and down. That elder fool showed no improvement after years of treatment. I, out of kindness, found him a nicer, more affordable place to rest. Don't even thank me. The casual cruelty of her words, the absolute dismissal of a man's life, struck Xu Wonro with the force of a physical blow. The woman she had called her sister, the man she promised to marry, they were vultures, picking apart the carcass of her life. "And the house?" Wonro whispered, her gaze sweeping over the movers, the boxes, the life she was being evicted from. "A necessary transaction," Liu Jing said, his voice cold and final. "Your grandfather's mounting debts. The cost of his care. He signed the deed over to me months ago to manage his assets. This is just settling accounts. Equals scene. Scene equals. The city skyline sliced through the afternoon haze, a testament to ambition and concrete will. From the 58th floor of the Liu Group Tower, the world below seemed a distant, manageable map of intersecting lives. This was the view Xu Wonro had promised herself, not as a tourist gazing up in awe, but as a conqueror looking down from the throne room of her enemy. 3 years. 1,095 days of meticulously rebuilding herself from the rubble of betrayal. The name Shu Wonro was a ghost, a whisper of a naive girl who loved easily and trusted too deeply. Today, she was Kelly, a name forged in the unforgiving crucible of Paris's design world. A name that commanded respect and six-figure contracts. Her armor was a bespoke charcoal grey pantsuit, its lines as sharp and uncompromising as her new soul. Her 4-inch stilettos clicked against the polished marble of the executive lobby with the rhythmic finality of a ticking clock counting down to a detonation. Her target was not the company itself, but a viper nestled within its gilded cage. Liu Jing, director of the Urban Development Division, the man who had once been her fiancé, who had stood by and smiled while her best friend, his lover, systematically dismantled her life, stole her designs, and left her with nothing but the public shame and the foreclosure notice on her family home. Getting this meeting had been a masterstroke of strategy. Kelly's firm, Aura, had become a global phenomenon. When Liu Group announced its landmark Elysian Towers project, she had leveraged her burgeoning reputation to submit a proposal so innovative, so undeniably brilliant, that to ignore it would have been corporate malpractice. She had woven into the contract a non-negotiable clause, a mandatory preliminary consultation with the CEO himself, and a subsequent integration phase requiring direct oversight alongside the project's director. It was a Trojan horse, impeccably designed. Liu Jing would be forced to work under her, to watch her succeed with the very talent he had once tried to bury. Revenge, she had learned, was not a dish best served cold. It was a banquet to be prepared with precision and served in the spotlight. An executive assistant with a practiced, deferential smile led her down a silent, art-lined corridor. "Mr. Liu is ready for you, Miss Kelly." The double doors of the hall were monolithic slabs of dark, polished mahogany. They swung inward without a sound, revealing an office that was less a workspace and more a statement of absolute power. One entire wall was a sheet of seamless glass, framing the city in a breathtaking panorama. The air was cool and still, scented with the faint, clean aroma of bergamot and old leather. A man stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the blinding afternoon light, his hands clasped behind him as he studied the urban sprawl. He was tall, his frame lean but broad-shouldered beneath a perfectly tailored navy suit. He didn't turn immediately, letting the silence stretch, a subtle test of her nerve. Shu Wonro did not fidget. She did not clear her throat. She simply stood her ground, her portfolio held loosely in one hand, her presence a calm, immovable object. Finally he turned, and the world tilted on its axis. For a fleeting, terrifying second, the carefully constructed walls of Kelly threatened to crumble. It wasn't the man's face she recognized, but something in his eyes, a deep, penetrating stillness that seemed to look past the designer and see the girl she had been. They were dark, intense, and held an unnerving flicker of familiarity. She dismissed it instantly. A trick of the light, a phantom of her over-caffeinated mind. This was Liu Bowen, the reclusive, almost mythical CEO of the Liu Group, a man whose public photograph was a decade old, a man known for his ruthless business acumen and his profound aversion to the press. He was a variable she hadn't accounted for, a king on a chessboard where she had only planned to corner a pawn. His features were sculpted, more handsome than any grainy photograph had suggested. A strong jaw, a straight nose, lips that were set in a neutral line, that hinted at a capacity for both cruelty and a smile. He moved from the window with a fluid grace that belied his powerful build, his gaze never leaving her face. "Miss Kelly," he said. His voice was a low, resonant baritone that filled the vast office, a sound like smooth whiskey and buried secrets. "Welcome to Liu Group. It's her." Liu Bowen thought, the words a silent thunderclap in his mind. The cool, collected CEO facade was a dam holding back a flood of emotion. 3 years he had searched, 3 years of private investigators turning up dead ends, of chasing shadows. And now, she had walked into his office under a different name, wearing a confidence so absolute it was like a second skin. The soft, hopeful girl who had once patched up his scraped knee behind a forgotten orphanage, the young woman whose name had been bound to his on a marriage certificate he had yet to acknowledge, was gone. In her place was this breathtaking, formidable stranger. He could see the ghost of the girl he remembered in the elegant curve of her cheekbones, in the stubborn set of her jaw. But her eyes, they were different. Once warm and trusting, they were now cool, guarded, glinting with a diamond-hard resolve. "Mr. Liu." She won a reply, her voice perfectly modulated, betraying none of the momentary shock. She extended a hand. Her grip was firm, brief, all business. Scene. Scene equals. The air in the executive corridor of the Liu Group Tower was a testament to curated power. It was chilled to a precise temperature, smelling faintly of ozone and expensive, understated floral arrangements. Light from floor to ceiling windows glinted off polished marble floors, each reflection a perfect, distorted mirror of the cityscape outside. It was an environment designed to intimidate, to remind every visitor of their place in the ground hierarchy of global commerce. Liu Jing felt the pressure like a physical weight on his shoulders. He tugged at the knot of his silk tie, a nervous habit he thought he'd conquered years ago. Beside him, Yao Qingqing stood with a manufactured pose, her posture rigid, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. They were here on a precipice, their company bleeding capital, teetering on the edge of a collapse so catastrophic it made Liu Jing's stomach clench. This project, the design for Madame Liu's private villa, was more than a contract. It was a lifeline. Securing it meant securing the favor and potentially the financial backing of Liu Buoyan himself. "Remember, Qingqing," Liu Jing murmured, his voice a low, anxious hum. "Focus on Madame Liu. Her tastes are traditional, classic, elegance over novelty. If we win her over, Liu Buoyan will have to concede." Yao Qingqing tossed her head, a cascade of professionally styled hair falling over her shoulder. "Don't patronize me, Jing. I know what I'm doing. I spent weeks studying Madame Liu's public appearances and the estates she frequents. My design is flawless." Her confidence was a brittle veneer, and the slight tremor in her hand as she adjusted her blazer betrayed the desperation churning beneath. They were early, a calculated move to show eagerness. As they waited near the grand, frosted glass doors of the main conference room, a woman in a simple, elegant pantsuit stepped out of a side office. She held a tablet, her head bowed as she studied it, a brow furrowed in concentration. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek, no-nonsense ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup, her features clean and sharp. She moved with a quiet, unobtrusive grace, pausing to run a hand over a textured wall panel, her expression thoughtful, analytical. Yao Qingqing's gaze sharpened, her lips curling into a sneer of contempt. She saw not a professional, but an underling. The simple attire, the lack of ostentatious jewelry, it all screamed unimportant. In her world, power was displayed, not quietly wielded. "Excuse me," Yao Qingqing called out, her voice laced with the condescending authority she reserved for service staff. "Could you get us some coffee? 2 lattes. 1 with oatmeal. And be quick about it. We have an important meeting." The woman looked up from her tablet, her gaze lifting slowly. For a fraction of a second, her eyes were blank, uncomprehending. Then, recognition dawned, and a dangerous, glacial calm settled over her features. It was Xu Warmero. 3 years. 3 years had passed since Yao Qingqing had stood in the ruins of Xu Warmero's life. Her arm linked through Liu Jing's, a triumphant smirk on her face. 3 years since they had taken everything: her fiancé, her best friend, her family home, her professional reputation. The woman they had left broken and destitute was supposed to have vanished, swallowed by obscurity and shame. Yet here she was, in the heart of the Lu Group empire. Ya Qingqing's mind, unable to process this impossibility, defaulted to cruelty. She must be desperate. A janitor, a coffee girl, perfect. The thought was a bomb to the festering insecurity that her own precarious position had created. My God, is that you? Womero. Ya Qingqing's voice dripped with mock surprise, loud enough for any passing assistant to hear. I almost didn't recognize you. Times must be tough if you're working as a glorified janitor now. I suppose some people just aren't cut out for the design world. She glanced at Lu Jing, seeking his complicity. He looked frozen, his face paling as the implications of this encounter began to crash down on him. Xu Womro said nothing. She simply straightened to her full height, her posture radiating a composed strength that made Ya Qingqing's taunt sound shrill and pathetic. On a nearby console table sat a decorative pitcher of ice water, infused with lemon and mint for guests. With a deliberate, unhurried movement, Xu Wonro picked it up. What are you doing? Ya Qingqing asked, a flicker of unease in her eyes. Without a word, Xu Womro tilted the pitcher and pulled the entire contents over Ya Qingqing's head. The splash echoed in the cavernous hallway. Ice cubes clattered to the marble floor. Water, frigid and shocking, streamed down Ya Qingqing's face, plastering her expensive hair to her scalp and soaking the front of her silk blouse, turning it transparent. She gasped, sputtering, her carefully constructed image dissolving into a mess of dripping mascara and utter humiliation. You bitch, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Xu Womro placed the empty pitcher back on the console with a quiet, definitive click. Her eyes, cold and clear as the ice water now pooling at Ya Qingqing's feet, locked onto her former friend. Let me teach you a lesson in etiquette, Qingqing, Xu Womro said, her voice low and steady, each word a perfectly polished stone of contempt. First, you never assume someone's station based on their attire. It's classless. Second, you should learn the difference between wealth you've earned through talent and hard work, and wealth you've acquired by sleeping your way to the top. The first commands respect. The second, well, it just gets you wet. Lu Jing finally found his voice, stepping forward. Wonro, that's enough. What are you even doing here? Xu Wonro's gaze shifted to him, and the coldness in her eyes intensified into a blade of pure ice. The sight of him, the man she had once planned to build a life with, who had orchestrated her ruin alongside this woman, ignited the furnace of her long-nurtured vengeance. Oh, that's right, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. I forgot to mention that string of bad luck your company has been having over the past year. The supply chain disruptions, the sudden withdrawal of your biggest investor, the negative press that appeared out of nowhere. She paused, letting the words hang in the air, watching the dawning horror spread across his face. The bankruptcy you're about to file for, that was my doing. Every bit of it. She took a step closer, invading their space, forcing them back. My return wasn't a coincidence. My appearance here has one singular purpose. Our eyes bored into theirs, stripping them bare of their arrogance and leaving only fear. It is to ensure that when your empire crumbles, you are left with nothing. Not a single stone to mark your grave. My revenge has only just begun. Before either of them could respond, the frosted glass doors to the conference room slid open with a quiet hiss. A severe-looking assistant stood there. Mr. Lu, Ms. Yeah. Mr. Lu is ready for you. The assistant's eyes widened slightly at the sight of a drenched Ya Qingqing, but her professional mask slipped right back into place. It was clear she'd had everything, humiliated and seething. Ya Qingqing had no choice. but to enter, trying and failing to cover her soaked blouse with her handbag. Liu Jing followed, his face ashen, his mind reeling from Xu Wanruo's declaration. She hadn't just returned, she had returned as a force of nature, an architect of his destruction. Xu Wanruo entered last, her demeanor calm and professional, as if the preceding drama had been nothing more than a minor distraction. The conference room was a theater of power. A colossal mahogany table stretched down its length, reflecting the panoramic view of the city skyline. At the head sat Lu Buoen, his presence filling the room. He was impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit, his expression unreadable, his deep-set eyes missing nothing. Beside him, exuding an aura of old money elegance, was his mother, Madame Lu. Several other senior executives lined the table, their faces impassive. Lu Buoen's gaze flickered over Yao Qingqing's disheveled state, and then met Xu Wanruo's for a brief, charged moment. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a quiet, assessing intensity. He already knew. "Miss Yao, Mr. Lu," he said, his voice a smooth baritone that commanded absolute attention. "You may begin." Flustered and shivering slightly, Yao Qingqing tried to salvage the situation. She fumbled with her laptop, her presentation flashing onto the massive screen behind Lu Buoen. It was a collection of soulless, derivative designs, ground archways, opulent chandeliers, gaudy gilded furniture. She spoke in platitudes, peppering her speech with buzzwords like timeless luxury and bespoke elegance, her voice wavering as she directed her pitch almost exclusively to Madame Lu. "As you can see, Madame Lu," she chirped, forcing a smile, "we have focused on a neoclassical approach that honors tradition, while providing all the comforts of modern living." Madame Lu listened politely, her expression a mask of detached interest. Lu Buoen remained silent, his fingers steepled, his eyes never leaving the screen. When she finished, a tense silence filled the room. Lu Buoen gestured coolly to Xu Wanruo. "Miss Xu, your turn." Xu Wanruo rose, connecting her tablet to the system with practiced ease. Her presentation was the antithesis of Yao Qingqing's. The screen lit up with sketches that were clean, innovative, and deeply personal. She didn't just present a building, she presented a home. She spoke of light, space, and the flow of energy. Her design integrated nature, with living walls, a central water feature that snaked through the ground floor, and vast panes of glass that blurred the line between inside and out. It was modern yet warm, minimalist yet soulful. "The guiding principle of my designer's sanctuary," Xu Wanruo explained, her voice confident and clear. "Our home for Madame Lu shouldn't be a monument to wealth, but a reflection of a life well lived. It should be a place of peace, of family, of quiet contemplation. Every line, every material is chosen to evoke a sense of tranquility and connection." She walked them through the digital rendering, her passion for her work evident in every word. She had anticipated Madame Lu's classical tastes, but instead of pandering to them with clichés, she had reinterpreted them, weaving traditional motifs into a contemporary tapestry. When she concluded, the executives murmured in appreciation. Madame Lu herself looked intrigued, a genuine spark of interest in her eyes. Lu Buoen finally spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the room. "I have made my decision." He looked directly at Xu Wanruo. "The Lu group will be proceeding with Ms. Xu's design." Liu Jing slumped in his chair as if struck. Yao Qingqing shot to her feet, her face contorted with disbelief and fury. "What? That's impossible. My design is far more suitable for someone of Madame Lu's stature. Hers is just empty space and glass." "Your design," Lu Buoen said, his tone dropping several degrees, "is not only uninspired, it is also fraudulent." Xu Wanruo, anticipating this, calmly tapped her tablet. On the screen, her design was replaced by a side-by-side comparison. On the left was Yao Qingqing's main hall rendering. On the right was an image from a German architectural journal published 5 years prior, showcasing the lobby of a boutique hotel in Munich designed by the celebrated master, Klaus Richter. The resemblance was not just striking, it was exact. The archways, the chandelier, the specific arrangement of the furniture, it was a direct copy. A collective gasp went through the room. The executives stared, their expressions turning from professional indifference to open contempt. Yao Qingqing's face drained of all color, leaving a blotchy, pale mask of horror. Plagiarism is the last refuge of the incompetent, Ms. Yao, Xu Womro stated, her voice even but merciless. You didn't just study Madame Nu's tastes. You Googled luxury classical interiors and stole the work of a true artist, hoping no one would be discerning enough to notice. You have not only insulted my intelligence, but the intelligence of everyone in this room. Yao Qingqing stammered, incoherent noises escaping her lips. Eitzits and homage a tribute. Lu Buom rose slowly from his chair, his towering height and cold fury silencing her instantly. He walked around the table until he stood before Lu Jing and the trembling Yao Qingqing. "And homage," he repeated, the words dripping with sarcasm. "Mr. Lu, your company is on the brink of collapse, and you bring a plagiarist to pitch for a contract that was your last hope? This demonstrates a level of judgment so poor it borders on self-sabotage." His gaze shifted to Yao Qingqing. "And you come into my building, insult a member of my team, and then present stolen work as your own. You are a disgrace to your profession." He turned to his head of security, who had appeared silently at the door. "Escort these two out, and make a note. Neither they nor any company affiliated with them are to ever be considered for a Lu Group contract again. Blacklist them permanently." The finality of his words was absolute. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a corporate execution. As security led the utterly broken pair away, Yao Qingqing sobbing hysterically, Lu Jing a hollowed-out shell of a man, the room fell silent. The meeting was over. The executives began to pack their things, careful not to look at Xu Womro or Lu Buon. Xu Womro stood alone, the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly beginning to fade, leaving a profound and weary quiet in its wake. She had won. She had drawn first blood, and it was a deep, satisfying cut. But as she looked at Lu Buon, who was now watching her with an unreadable expression, she knew this was just one victory in a much larger war. The taste of revenge was sweet, but it was also chillingly complex, pulling her deeper into a world of power and consequence she was only just beginning to understand. Scene. Scene equals. The setting sun bled across the skyline, painting the sprawling cityscape in hues of molten gold and bruised purple. Inside the penthouse office of the Lu Group, the light sliced through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, sharp shadows that seemed to carve the cavernous space into sections of power and secrecy. The air was still, thick with the scent of expensive leather and the faint, clean aroma of paper. It was the scent of control, of an empire built on precision and foresight. Xu Womro stood before the monolith of a desk, a posture, a study in composed gratitude. 3 years of exile and relentless hard work had forged a new armor around her. But beneath the impeccable lines of her custom-tailored suit, a quiet tremor of exhaustion ran through her. She had won. With Lu Buon's inscrutable but decisive support, she had reclaimed her name as a designer, publicly shaming her rivals, her treacherous ex-fiancé, Lu Jing, and her venomous ex-best friend, Lin Wei, at the industry's most prestigious gala. The victory was sweet, but it was only one half of the equation. "Mr. Lu," she began, her voice steady and clear, betraying none of the turmoil within. "I can't." Scene. Scene equals. The grand entrance to the Imperial Hotel's Starlight Ballroom was a glittering artery of high society, pulsing with the soft flash of diamonds and the low murmur of ambition. Crystal chandeliers rained down a cold, brilliant light onto the polished marble floors, where the city's elite drifted like elegant fountains. Shortdrama stood just at the edge of it all, a stark, beautiful silhouette against the gilded chaos. Her gown, a midnight blue creation of her own design, flowed around her like liquid night, simple yet more commanding than the frivolous ruffles and sequins that surrounded her. She had known this would be the first hurdle. The security guard, broad and impassive, blocked her path with a polite but immovable arm. "Ma'am, your invitation." She met his gaze without flinching, her voice calm and even. "I am a guest of Liu Bowen." A ripple of condescending laughter cut through the air before the guard could respond. From the throng of guests emerged Liu Jing and Yao Qingqing, arm in arm, their expressions a perfect symphony of smug disdain. Yao Qingqing, draped in a garish flamingo pink dress that screamed for attention, Adwanro's gown with a flash of envy before her lips curled into a sneer. A guest of Bowen. Yao Qingqing's voice was deliberately loud, pitched to draw the attention of the surrounding socialites. "Don't be ridiculous. You're nothing but a shameless homewrecker, desperately clinging to a man who is worlds above you. Did you really think you could sneak in here?" Liu Jing adjusted his tie, his gaze sweeping over Wanro with a possessive cruelty she remembered all too well. "Wanro, you've learned nothing. 3 years and you're still trying to climb into circles where you don't belong. Seducing a man like Liu Bowen doesn't make you his equal. It just makes you a commodity." The whispers started, a venomous tide rising around her. Homewrecker, shameless, that's her. The words were arrows, but the armor she had forged in the fires of betrayal was stronger now. She let their poison wash over her, her spine remaining ramrod straight. She didn't look at Liu Jing. Her focus was entirely on the woman who had once been her sister, her confidant. "Taste, Qingqing," Shortdrama said, her voice a low, cutting whisper that somehow carried further than Yao Qingqing's shrill accusations. "It's the one thing money can't buy, and a guilty conscience can't fabricate. You can wear all the jewels in the world, but you'll never hide the cheapness of your character." Yao Qingqing gasped, her perfectly painted face contorting in fury. "How dare you, after everything you've done? You should be on your knees begging for forgiveness, not standing here lecturing me." "Kneel." A ghost of a smile touched Wanro's lips, cold and sharp. "I don't kneel for thieves, not anymore." Just as the tension reached its zenith, a sudden hush fell over the entrance hall. The crowd parted instinctively, a wave of deference and rippling through the guests. A figure of immense grace and authority was making her way toward them. Madame Liu, matriarch of the Liu Empire, glided forward, her cheongsam a cascade of embroidered peonies, her expression serene, but her eyes missing nothing. She stopped, her gaze sweeping over the tableau. The rigid security guard, the sneering couple, and the lone, defiant figure of Shortdrama. "What is the meaning of this commotion?" Madame Liu's voice was not loud, but it carried the indisputable weight of command. Liu Jing, seeing his chance to curry favor, stepped forward with a sycophantic bow. "Madame Liu, my apologies. This woman was attempting to enter without an invitation. We were simply reminding her of her place." Madame Liu's gaze settled on him, and the air grew 10 degrees colder. She took a deliberate step closer, her eyes narrowing. "Your place, remind me, Mr. Liu. What is your place? As I recall, you are the illegitimate child of the Liu family's second master. A boy brought in through the back door and given a name you didn't earn. Your entire standing is a gift, not a right. Do not presume to lecture others on where they belong." A collective, shocked gasp swept the crowd. Liu Jing's face went from pale to ashen, the public humiliation striking him like a physical blow. He staggered back as if she had slapped him. Madame Liu ignored him completely, turning her now warm gaze to Shu Wonro. With a grace that silenced every lingering whisper, she reached into her own beaded handbag and produced a heavy, cream-colored envelope embossed with the Liu family crest. She pressed it gently into Wonro's hand. "This was my personal invitation," she said, a voice softening with a maternal warmth that was as shocking as her previous frost. "I was saving it for a guest of honor. It seems she has arrived." She took Wonro's arm, her touch both a comfort and a shield, and turned to face the stunned onlookers. Her voice rang out, clear and final. "Child," she said, looking directly at Wonro with profound approval. "In a world of gilded pretenders, you carry yourself with true virtue. If only you'd marry into our family." The suggestion hung in the air, a pronouncement and a promise. It was not just an acceptance. It was a coronation, performed in front of the very court that had sought to condemn her. For the first time that night, Shu Wonro felt the unshakable certainty of victory. A warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with vindication. Scene. Scene equals. The gilded banquet hall of the Grand Astoria hummed with the delicate music of a string quartet and the clinking of crystal flutes. Shu Wonro felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes as she stood beside Madame Liu, the formidable matriarch of the Liu Empire. The air, thick with the scent of lilac and expensive perfume, felt charged, a silent stage awaiting its final act. Madame Liu, elegant in a sapphire cheongsam, held Shu Wonro's hand with a surprising warmth. Her gaze was appraising but kind. "My dear, you have such a rare pose," she said, her voice a low, cultured murmur that cut through the surrounding chatter. "It's a shame my son is so buried in his work. He needs a woman of your substance to pull him out of the boardroom." Shu Wonro's smile felt painted on. The dramatic irony was almost suffocating. She glanced across the room, searching for Liu Bowen, her husband of 3 months, the very son his mother was unknowingly trying to set her up with. "This is a conversation I was not prepared for," she thought, her heart doing a nervous flutter against her ribs. "Madame Liu, you're far too kind," Shu Wonro began, trying to choose her words with the precision of a designer cutting silk. "But I'm afraid I'm not nonsense," Madame Liu insisted gently, patting her hand. "My Bowen, he seems cold, but he has a good heart. He just needs the right person, someone strong, like you. Actually, the thing is, I'm already married," Shu Wonro finally managed, the words a quiet rush of air. Madame Liu's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose in surprise. "Oh, well. What a pity for my son. Your husband is a very lucky man." A deep, resonant voice cut in from behind them, smooth as velvet and twice as commanding. "He certainly is. Mother." Liu Bowen materialized beside them, a towering presence in a flawlessly tailored tuxedo. He slid a protective arm around Shu Wonro's waist, his touch a familiar anchor in the swirling social currents. His eyes, dark and intense, held a glint of amusement as he looked at his stunned mother. He leaned in, his voice dropping just enough to be both intimate and profoundly dramatic. "I'm lucky because she's my wife," he stated, the words landing with the force of a gavel. He paused, letting the revelation settle before delivering the final, irrefutable blow. "She's your daughter-in-law." The world seemed to halt. The string quartet faltered on a note. The low hum of conversation around them died into a pocket of stunned silence. Madame Liu's eyes widened, shifting from her son's resolute face to Shu Wonro's slightly flushed one. For a heartbeat, there was only shock. Then, comprehension dawned, followed by a slow-blooming smile that lit up her entire face with genuine, unadulterated joy. "You rascal," she exclaimed, tapping her son's arm playfully before her attention turned entirely to Shu Wonro, her expression softening with pure affection. "So this is the secret you've been keeping?" Without another word, she unclasped a bracelet from her own wrist. It was a magnificent piece of translucent, cool jade, its ends capped with an intricate silver dragon and phoenix clasped a legendary Liu family heirloom. Every matriarch of the Liu family has worn this, Madame Liu said, her voice thick with emotion as she fastened the heavy, cool jade onto Xu Wanro's wrist. It belongs to you now. The weight of it was more than just metal and stone. It was the weight of acceptance, of legacy. A tear pricked a corner of Xu Wanro's eye. This was the belonging she had craved, a family she had never dared to hope for. Liu Buoyan watched the exchange, his stern facade melting into a look of profound pride. He gently took a champagne flute from a passing waiter and tapped it with a spoon. The clear, ringing sound commanded the attention of the entire hall. The whispers ceased. Every eye turned to the stage he had just created. Everyone, he began, his voice effortlessly filling the vast space. Equals scene. Scene equals. The rhythmic sweep of the wipers did little to clear Liu Buoyan's vision. It wasn't the rain obscuring his view, but a cold, coiling rage. Across the street, under the forgiving glow of a cafe awning, stood Xu Wanro. And she was not alone. The man beside her, Shenzichu, held an umbrella over them both, a gesture of casual intimacy that felt like a physical blow. Buoyan watched the easy way Zichu angled the shield to protect her from a gust of wind, the familiar smile he offered her, the way her shoulders, usually so tense and squared for battle, seemed to soften in his presence. A laugh escaped her, a sound Buoyan had only heard a handful of times and never directed at him with such unguarded warmth. It was a sound that belonged to him, or so the possessive, irrational part of his soul screamed. His knuckles were white where he gripped the leather-wrapped steering wheel of his Bentley. The interior, usually a sanctuary of polished wood and silent efficiency, felt like a cage. "Sir," his assistant Lin began from the passenger seat, his voice a careful, diplomatic murmur. "Perhaps we are misinterpreting the situation. Designer Xu has no reason to believe you are connected to her. Mr. Shen is likely just a colleague, an old friend." Buoyan's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking violently. "An old friend," he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "Look at them, Lin. Is that how friends stand?" He looks at her like she's the only person in this rain-drenched city. "With all due respect, CEO Liu, she believes she is married to a stranger she has never met, a man her family forced upon her. She is no emotional obligation to an abstract concept. You haven't given her a reason to." Lin, ever the pragmatist, was trying to apply logic to a situation drowning in raw emotion. It was like trying to reason with a thunderstorm. A humorless smirk twisted Buoyan's lips. He finally tore his gaze from the window. The image of her smile burned into his mind. An obligation. Don't be naive. She doesn't need one. He threw the car into gear, the powerful engine roaring to life with a ferocity that matched his own. She came back for one thing: revenge. She approached me, our company, because she sees me as a weapon to use against Jin Yicheng and her so-called sister. That's all I am to her. A means to an end. He accelerated into the slick, dark street, leaving the warm cafe scene behind. But he couldn't leave the feeling. It clung to him, a toxic mix of jealousy and a profound, aching loneliness. He wanted her to see him, Liu Buoyan, not the powerful CEO of the Liu Corporation who could help her crush her enemies. He wanted her to look at him the way she had just looked at Shenzichu. And the fact that she didn't, that she couldn't, was a shard of ice in his heart. Dismissing Lin with a curt wave at the office, he spent the next several hours in a state of simmering fury. He stared at market projections that saw her face. He reviewed architectural plans, but could only picture the line of her throat as she laughed. The vast, minimalist expanse of his penthouse office, usually a symbol of his control and power, now felt like a mausoleum for his hopes. By nightfall, the storm inside him had found its outlet in a bottle of aged whiskey. It wasn't enough to dull the edges, but it was enough to fuel a reckless, desperate plan. The alley stank of damp concrete and discarded things. Shiwamuro clutched her grocery bag tighter, her keys already in hand as she navigated the poorly lit path to her apartment building's side entrance. A flicker of movement in the shadows near the overflowing bins made her freeze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was about to turn and run when a low groan reached her ears. It was a sound of pain, not aggression. Hesitantly, she took a step closer. The lone, flickering streetlight cast a sickly yellow glow on a figure slumped against the brick wall. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that was now rumpled and damp, and radiated an aura of wealth completely at odds with his surroundings. Lu Bowen. "You have got to be kidding me," she muttered under her breath. She moved closer, her initial fear replaced by a wave of exasperation. The potent scent of expensive liquor hit her first. His head was bowed, his dark hair falling over his forehead, obscuring his expression. He looked wrecked, defeated. It was a stark contrast to the imperious, untouchable CEO she confronted in boardrooms. "Mr. Liu," she said, her voice sharp, "what are you doing here?" He lifted his head slowly, as if the effort was monumental. His eyes, usually so sharp and piercing, were unfocused. He blinked, trying to place her. "Shiwamuro." He slurred, the name a soft, broken thing on his tongue. "This is a private residential area. You can't just pass out in an alley." She wanted to be angry, to walk away and leave this complicated, infuriating man to his own devices, but then she saw his hand. He had it braced against the rough brick wall, and his knuckles were scraped raw, beads of blood welling up through the grime. A fresh wave of something not quite pity, but a reluctant, nagging compassion washed over her. With a sigh that carried the weight of her entire exhausting day, she set down her groceries. "Come on," she said, her tone softening despite herself. "You can't stay here. Get up." He tried to push himself up, but stumbled, his weight lurching against her. He was heavier than he looked, a solid wall of muscle and misery. An involuntary gasp escaped her as his arm wrapped around her shoulders for support. The contact sent a jolt through her system, a strange, unwelcome warmth. He smelled of whiskey and rain and something else, something uniquely him. "My driver," he mumbled into her hair. "Left him." "Of course you did," she grumbled, half supporting, half dragging him towards the entrance. Getting him up the 2 flights of stairs to her small apartment was an ordeal. He was a dead weight, his feigned incapacitation maddeningly convincing. She finally managed to deposit him onto her small, simple sofa, where he immediately collapsed, his long legs sprawling into the limited space of her living room. He looked like a fallen god in her mortal world, magnificent and utterly out of place. She returned from the bathroom with a first aid kit, kneeling on the floor beside the sofa. "Give me your hand," she commanded softly. For once, he complied without argument, extending his injured hand. His skin was warm. As she gently cleaned the scrapes with an antiseptic wipe, he winced, hissing through his teeth. "Stay still," she chided, her touch surprisingly gentle. She worked in silence, her focus narrowed to the task. She was intensely aware of his eyes on her, watching her every move. The air in the small room grew thick, charged with unspoken questions. Why was he here? Why was he drinking himself into oblivion and ending up in her alley? Scene. Scene equals. The restroom of Eclat was a sanctuary of Carrara marble and soft, golden light. The air scented with expensive orchid and vanilla reed diffusers. Shiwamura stood before the ornate mirror, reapplying a sheer layer of lipstick, The muted clatter of cutlery and sophisticated chatter from the dining room a distant hum. She was a picture of composure, the crimson silk of her dress a stark, confident slash against the cool white of her surroundings. That her serenity was a carefully constructed facade. In the reflection, beyond her own steady gaze, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A sliver of black metal and glass, angled awkwardly from the gap in the adjoining stall door. A phone. Her heart didn't hammer. It turned to ice. 3 years ago, this would have sent her spiraling into a panic. Now, it ignited a cold, focused rage. She carefully capped her lipstick, the soft click echoing in the sudden silence. Without turning, she let her eyes drift to the stall door in the mirror. Filming in a private space is illegal. Chinking, she said, her voice smooth as polished stone. Even for you. The phone vanished. A beat of frantic shuffling. Then the stall door creaked open. Chinking emerged, her face a mask of feigned innocence that was crumbling at the edges. Her own designer dress, a pale, envious yellow, seemed to shrink around her. Wonro, I didn't see you there. I was just checking my makeup. Wonro finally turned, her body language radiating an unassailable authority. She leaned back against the marble vanity, crossing her arms. With your camera on and pointed at me. Your makeup must be fascinating. Yao Chinking's hands trembled slightly. You're mistaken. I was. Save it. Wonro cut in, her tone sharp enough to draw blood. She slowly pushed off the counter and took a deliberate step forward. Chinking flinched, instinctively taking a step back. You and Lu Jing have been circling me all night like vultures. Did you really think I wouldn't be prepared? You wanted something to leak to the press, something to paint me as unstable or unprofessional before the Azure Horizons project bid. I don't know what you're talking about. Chinking's voice rose, a tremor of genuine fear running through it. You're being paranoid. Am I? Wonro smiled, a chillingly beautiful expression devoid of any warmth. She pulled out her own phone, its sleek case gleaming under the recessed lighting. She tapped the screen, her movements leisurely. It's funny, you trying to get a video of me, because I already have one of you. Panic flashed in Yao Chinking's eyes. What? That's impossible, is it? Wonro angled the screen away, her thumb hovering over an imaginary icon. The audio is remarkably clear. A woman, caught in the act, admitting to her intentions. A full confession. Imagine how the board at your father's company would react to that. Or better yet, our Lu Buon would. The mention of Lu Buon's name was the final blow. Yao Chinking's face went white. The power he wielded was absolute, and his protectiveness of Wonro was becoming legendary. You can't. Delete it. Please. Wonro. Delete it. Wonro watched her former best friend unravel, a bitter satisfaction churning in her gut. She held the pose for a moment longer, letting the terror sink in, before her expression flattened into one of utter contempt. She lowered her phone and slid it back into her evening bag. There's nothing to delete, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Chinking stared, confused. There was never any video. I didn't need one. Wonro took one last step forward, invading her space, forcing Chinking to meet her gaze. Your face just now was all the confession I'll ever need. Stay away from me. This is your only warning. With that, she swept past her, leaving Chinking trembling and humiliated in the sterile, silent opulence of the restroom. Wonro returned to their table, the warmth of the main dining room a welcome embrace. Lu Buon looked up from his phone, his sharp gaze instantly assessing her. He noted the rigid set of her shoulders, the lingering frost in her eyes. Everything all right? He asked, his voice a low murmur meant only for her. She gave him a small, tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. that the confidence was returning. Perfectly, she lied, placing her hand over his on the table. Just needed to powder my nose. He knew it was more than that, but he also knew she would tell him when she was ready. For now, his presence was a silent, unshakable support. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit corner of the restaurant's bar, Yao Qingqing slid into the booth opposite Liu Jing, her hands still shaking with residual fear and fury. She knew. She hissed, her voice ragged. She knew what I was going to do and she turned it on me. She bluffed. Jing, she made a complete fool of me. Liu Jing didn't even look up from swirling the amber liquid in his glass. His handsome face was a placid mask of calculation. I told you that was a clumsy approach. Humiliating her in person is temporary. We need to destroy her reputation publicly and permanently. He finally met her gaze. His eyes cold. Amateurs react. Professionals anticipate. It's time for the real plan. He slid his phone across the polished wood table. On the screen was a series of photos, clearly taken by a professional with a long lens. The first showed Xu Wanro laughing with another man, the renowned architect, Shenzichu, outside a charming cafe. The next few were more damning. Shenzichu was gently helping her into a car, his hand lingering on her arm. The final, killer shot was of them a week prior, at a park, where Shenzichu was pushing a small, laughing child on a swing as Xu Wanro looked on with an expression of pure, maternal affection. A slow, venomous smile spread across Yao Qingqing's face, erasing all traces of her earlier humiliation. The narrative wrote itself. The wife of Liu Bowen, CEO of the formidable Tianheng Group, Liu Jing narrated softly, as if reading a headline. Caught in a clandestine affair with a famous architect, and, is that a secret child? Yao Qingqing picked up the phone, her eyes gleaming with malice. The humiliation she felt moments ago was nothing compared to the ruin these photos would bring. They wouldn't just be questioning Xu Wanro's integrity. They'd be attacking her marriage to one of the most powerful men in the city. The scandal would be explosive, inescapable. It would shatter her credibility for the Azure Horizons project and brand her a fraud in the eyes of the world. This is better, Yao Qingqing whispered, her voice thick with glee. This is so much better. She looked at Liu Jing, a shared, toxic triumph passing between them. Let Xu Wanro have her small victory in the restroom. They were about to burn her entire kingdom to the ground. She was entirely convinced of their impending success, utterly unaware that the woman they sought to destroy had already anticipated this very move, and had long since prepared a counterattack of her own. Scene. Scene equals. The air in the private dining room of Cecile et al. Was thick with the scent of white truffle and old money. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, intimidating glow on the mahogany walls, reflecting in the polished silverware laid out with geometric precision. Xu Wanro felt like a porcelain doll placed carefully on display, an accessory to the opulent scene rather than a participant. Across the table, Madame Liu, matriarch of the Liu Empire, exuded an aura of effortless command. Her silk cheongsam was the color of champagne, her pearls luminous against her skin. She smiled, a gesture that was both a blessing and a verdict. Liu Bowen sat beside Wanro, a silent, solid presence. His posture was ramrod straight, his custom-tailored suit a dark armor against his mother's effusive warmth. He hadn't said more than 5 words since they arrived, but Wanro could feel the tension radiating from him, a low hum of familial duty. Wanro, my dear, Madame Liu began, her voice as smooth as the aged wine in their glasses. She slid a velvet box across the damask tablecloth, a little something, to welcome you properly. Wanro's fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Nestled inside was a jade bracelet, its green so deep and translucent it seemed to hold a liquid light within. It was an antique, clearly a family heirloom, and its weight felt less like a gift and more like a mantle of expectation. Madame Liu, I can't accept this. It's far too precious. Womaro's voice was a soft murmur, easily swallowed by the room's grandeur. Nonsense. It belonged to my grandmother. It's meant to be worn by the woman of the Liu household. Madame Liu's eyes crinkled, but her gaze was sharp, analytical. Besides, she added, leaning forward conspiratorially, they say this particular jade promotes fertility. This old woman is not getting any younger. I'd very much like to hold a grandchild before my eyesight fails me. A flush crept up Wonro's neck. Beside her, Liu Bowen shifted, the fabric of his suit rustling. Mother, he said, his voice a low, warning rumble. We've been married for 2 months, and what productive months they have been, Madame Liu declared, completely unfazed. She waved a dismissive hand. Work, 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 that's all you do. But a family is the greatest enterprise, Bowen, and Wonro is your most valuable partner. She turned her laser focus back to Wonro, her smile softening into something genuine. I know you're not just a pretty face. Your design portfolio is impressive. You have talent, child. Real vision. The unexpected praise was a bomb on Wonro's raw nerves. For 3 years, she had fought tooth and nail to rebuild her name, to let her work speak for itself after Liu Jing and Yao Qingqing had tried to shatter her reputation. To hear it acknowledged by a woman like Madame Liu felt like a validation she hadn't known she craved. Which is why, Madame Liu continued, clapping her hands together with an air of finality, I've taken the liberty of arranging a small meeting for you. Right here. In fact, in a few minutes. Liu Bowen's head snapped up. Mother, you didn't. I did, she beamed. Gu Shouting is joining us for dessert. His company just acquired a new property downtown. They need a lead designer for the entire corporate headquarters. A legacy project. I thought of you immediately. Wonro. Wonro's heart hammered against her ribs. Gu Shouting, the CEO of Zenith Development, Liu Bowen's closest friend, and one of the most influential players in the city's architectural landscape. This wasn't just a project. It was a career-defining opportunity. It was a lifeline thrown from the very peak of the mountain she had been struggling to climb. Before she could fully process the shock, the door opened. A man with a disarmingly charming smile and eyes that sparkled with mischief entered. He was dressed more casually than Liu Bowen, in a designer blazer and an open-collared shirt. But he carried himself with an equal, if more relaxed, air of authority. Auntie, Gu Shouting said, bending to give Madame Lo a respectful kiss on the cheek. Bowen, and you must be the famous Xu Wonro. My friend here has been surprisingly tight-lipped about you. He extended a hand to Wonro, his grip firm and friendly. I prefer my private life to remain private, Liu Bowen stated, his tone flat. But marriage is hardly private, it's a public declaration, Shouting countered, his grin widening. He slid into a chair, waving away the waiter. And business is all about synergy, partnership, chemistry. His eyes danced between Womoro and Bowen, and he tells me you're a brilliant designer. Miss Xu. Or should I say, Mrs. Liu. Wonro is fine, she managed, her professionalism kicking in. I've admired Zenith's projects for years, Mr. Gu, especially the Asher Tower. The use of sustainable materials was revolutionary. Please call me Shouting. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. I've seen your work. It has soul. But this project is more than just blueprints and materials. The brand is about connection, about harmony. So, before we even talk about designs, I need to see if you and my stoic friend here actually have any. Liu Bowen's jaw tightened, Shouting, this is a professional meeting. Exactly. And the Liu Corporation is a key investor. The harmony between our companies starts at the top. Shouting's gaze was sharp, probing. He was testing them. Testing the reality of this arranged marriage that had shocked their entire social circle. Indulge me. A small test. Stand up. Both of you. Reluctantly, they rose. Wonro felt a nervous tremor run through her. What was he planning, Bowen? Stand behind her. Put your hand on her waist. Wonro. I want you to lean back against him. Just trust him to hold you. The air crackled with tension. It was a preposterous request. A blurring of lines so profound it was almost insulting. Yet, Womra understood the subtext. He was looking for a crack in their facade. If she balked, if Bowen refused, it would signal that their partnership was a sham. This incredible opportunity would vanish. Taking a deep breath, she felt Lu Bowen step behind her. His presence was a wall of heat. Slowly, hesitantly, his hands settled on her waist. His touch was unexpectedly warm, firm, sending a jolt through the thin fabric of her dress. It wasn't possessive, but proprietary, protective. Just lean back, she told herself. It's an act. She let her weight fall backward, her head coming to rest against his shoulder. For a terrifying second, she feared he would be as rigid as stone, that the moment would be a caricature of intimacy. But he shifted, his body molding to hers, his arm tightening almost imperceptibly to support her fully. Her hair brushed against his jaw, and she caught the faint, clean scent of his cologne sandalwood and something cool, like winter air. His chest was solid, unyielding, and for the first time, she felt the steady, powerful beat of his heart against her back. Lu Bowen's mind was a maelstrom. He was furious with shouting for this cheap theatricality. Yet an undeniable current of something else, something warm and possessive, surged through him. She was lighter than he'd imagined, and she fit against him perfectly. He could feel the delicate line of her spine, the soft silk of her hair. He had married this woman out of obligation, a strategic move to placate his family and secure his position. He had intended to keep her at a clinical distance, but in this forced moment of closeness, the careful walls he'd constructed around his emotions began to feel terrifyingly thin. See, shouting said, his voice softer now, a knowing look in his eyes. That's what I'm talking about. Trust. Connection. Just then, the door to the VIP room swung open without a knock. Oh, my goodness. I'm so sorry to interrupt. The voice, sickly sweet and poisonously familiar, made Womra stiffen in Lu Bowen's arms. He felt the change in her immediately, the way her body went from pliant to brittle. Ya Chinking stood in the doorway, a vision in a tight, crimson dress. Beside her, looking pale and harried, was Lu Jing, Wonro's ex-fiancé, the man who had stood by and watched as Ya Chinking, her supposed best friend, tore her life apart. Chinking, Wonro said, her voice devoid of warmth as she gently disentangled herself from Lu Bowen's hold. The loss of his warmth was immediate and stark. Wonro and Mr. Lu. We were just having dinner next door and see your car. Lu Jing and I wanted to come and offer our congratulations on your marriage. Yao Qingqing gushed, her eyes sweeping over the room, taking in Gu shouting. The opulent setting, the jade bracelet on the table. A flicker of raw envy crossed her face before being replaced by a practiced smile. Lu Jing avoided Wonro's gaze, his eyes fixed on the floor. He looked diminished, a shadow of the ambitious man she once thought she loved. We brought a bottle of champagne to celebrate. Ya Qingqing continued, producing a bottle and several flutes from a bag held by a hovering waiter she'd clearly commandeered. But I had the bartender mix a special cocktail for you. Womro, a new beginnings. You must try it. She poured a vibrant, pink-hued liquid into a single flute and held it out to Womro, her smile unwavering. Lu Bowen took a step forward, subtly positioning himself between Womro and the outstretched glass. His eyes, cold and sharp as obsidian chips, were fixed on Yao Qingqing. He had investigated Womro's past. He knew exactly who these two people were and the venom they carried. That's very thoughtful, Womro said. her tone polite but icy. But I'm not drinking tonight. Oh, just one sip. For luck, Yao Qingqing insisted, pushing the glass closer. Her desperation was a dissonant note in her cheerful melody. She said no. Lu Buo's voice was dangerously quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. Gu Shouting, who had been observing the exchange with a lazy, amused expression, suddenly straightened. His playful demeanor vanished, replaced by a keen, shrewd focus. He watched Yao Qingqing's hand, a slight tremor in her fingers as she held the flute. You know, Shouting said, rising smoothly from his chair. That looks delicious. I'm quite thirsty myself. Before anyone could react, he plucked the glass from Yao Qingqing's hand. He didn't drink it. Instead, he swallowed the liquid, his eyes narrowed on the way it clung to the glass. A faint, almost imperceptible powdery residue clouding the crystal. Yao Qingqing's face went white. That's for Womero. I'm sure she won't mind if I test it for poison first, Shouting said lightly. But his eyes were like steel. He looked at Lu Buon, a silent question passing between them. Buon gave a nearly invisible nod. In that instant, everything clicked into place for Womero. The unannounced arrival. The insistence, the single, special drink. This was a repeat of 3 years ago, a desperate, pathetic attempt to publicly humiliate and incapacitate her. Lu Jing finally spoke, his voice cracking. Qingqing, let's just go. Not yet, Lu Buon said. He pulled out his phone and made a quiet call to his head of security. We have a situation in the VIP room at Les Cils et al. I want this drink analyzed, and I want our guests detained. Panic flared in Yao Qingqing's eyes. She abandoned all pretense of civility. You can't do this. We just came to say hello. She's trying to frame us. She rounded on Womero. You've always been jealous of me. You're trying to ruin me. Lu Jing, seeing his future implode, took a step forward. If you accuse us, we'll go to the press. We'll tell them everything, how you seduced Mr. Lu. How you're nothing but a social climbing snake. Womero met his desperate, hateful gaze without flinching. The fear she might have felt years ago was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had learned, she had prepared. You want to go to the press? She asked, her voice calm and clear. Let's talk about what we can give them. She took out her own phone. With a few taps, she brought up a photo gallery. She turned the screen toward Lu Jing. The first picture showed Yao Qingqing, wrapped in the arms of another man, a wealthy, married tycoon on the balcony of a hotel in Monaco. The date stamp was from 2 weeks ago. Womero swiped. Another photo, this one of them kissing in the back of a car. Another and another. Each one was a perfectly clear, irrefutable testament to Yao Qingqing's infidelity. Lu Jing stared at the screen, his face crumbling. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving behind a sickly, grey pallor. All the fight went out of him. He looked from the phone to Yao Qingqing, his expression one of utter devastation and betrayal. You wanted to leak rumors, Lu Jing. Womero said, her voice cutting. I have facts. You built your new life on the ruins of mine. Don't be surprised when you find the foundation is rotten. At that moment, 2 imposing men in dark suits entered the room. Yao Qingqing began to sob, a pathetic, theatrical sound. The security detail efficiently and quietly escorted the disgraced pair out, taking the drugged cocktail as evidence. The silence they left behind was deafening. The adrenaline that had surged through Womero abruptly receded, leaving her feeling hollow and shaky. The room suddenly felt too warm, the air too thin. A wave of dizziness washed over her, the delayed shock of the confrontation hitting her all at once. Her knees buckled. Lu Buon was there in an instant, his arms securely around her waist, pulling her against his chest. Womero, I'm fine, she whispered, but her vision was blurring at the edges. The world tilted, the crystal chandelier splintering into 1,000 points of light before darkness rushed in. When she came to, she was no longer in the restroom. She was lying on a soft leather seat, her head pillowed on someone's lap. The gentle rocking motion and the low hum of an engine told her she was in a car. She blinked, her eyes slowly focusing on the face above her. Lube Wowen. His brow was furrowed with concern, his usually severe expression softened by the dim, passing city lights. A flash of panic, a ghost of old trauma, seized her. What happened? She asked, her voice raspy. She tried to sit up, a sudden, primal fear making her heart race. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, a gesture that was both steadying and gentle. You fainted, the shock, most likely. We're almost home. She relaxed lightly, but the fear lingered. She had been vulnerable, unconscious. Did you? He understood her fragmented question immediately. His expression hardened, not with anger, but with a deep, resonant sincerity that startled her. Shiwamuro, he said, his voice low and firm, leaving no room for doubt. I'm not that kind of person. I do not prey on vulnerable people. He paused, his gaze unwavering. Nothing happened. I just took you home. You are safe, lying there, held by the man who was her husband in name only. Wamro looked into his eyes and saw not a ruthless CEO or a cold business partner, but a man of honor. And in the quiet safety of his car, speeding through the sleeping city, she realized the ground beneath her feet had irrevocably shifted. She was no longer fighting alone. Scene. Scene equals. The Grand Hall of the Zenith International Convention Center was a galaxy of manufactured stars. Chandeliers dripped crystal light onto a sea of tailored suits and couture gowns, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume, and the low, predatory hum of elite society. Tonight was Shiwonra's coronation, the launch of her Phoenix collection, a name she had chosen with deliberate, painful irony marked not just her return, but her conquest. Standing near the main stage, a flute of untouched champagne in her hand, she was the calm eye of the storm. Her gown, a deep sapphire silk of her own design, clung to her form like a second skin, elegant and formidable. Beside her, Lube Wowen was a bastion of quiet strength. He wore a simple, impeccably cut black suit that made him blend in and stand out all at once. His presence was a silent promise, a shield she hadn't known she needed until he was there. Her gaze drifted across the room, past the flashing cameras and fawning critics, and landed on them, Lu Jing and Yao Qingqing. They stood near the central ice sculpture, a pair of perfectly sculpted vipers. Lu Jing, her ex-fiancé, looked smug, his arm possessively around Yao Qingqing's waist, and Qingqing, her supposed best friend, the woman who had helped orchestrate her downfall, was preening under the attention, her hand resting delicately on her stomach in a gesture that was both subtle and screamingly loud. Shiwonro felt a familiar, cold knot tighten in her gut, a ghost of the girl who had been shattered 3 years ago. But the ghost no longer had power. She had forged herself in fire, and tonight, she was the one holding the torch. They looked like they own the world, she murmured, her voice a low vibration of contempt. Lube Wowen didn't look at them. His eyes were fixed on her. People who build their worlds on foundations of lies are only ever renting, he said, his tone as steady as granite. The lease is about to expire. As if on cue, the carefully constructed facade began to crack. It started with a raised voice, Yao Qingqing's. She pulled away from Lu Jing, her expression twisting from saccharine sweetness to a shrewish fury. You promised, Jing, you promised you would announce it tonight. Lu Jing's smile faltered. He grabbed her arm, hissing under his breath. Not here, Qingqing. We discussed this. No, you discussed it, she shrieked, her voice cutting through the polite chatter. The room began to quiet, Heads turning, phones subtly rising. I'm tired of being your dirty little secret while you parade me around as your perfect fiancé. I'm carrying your child. A collective gasp swept through the hall. The murmur became a roar of scandal. Cameras, no longer discreet, flashed with blinding intensity, capturing Liu Jing's face as it drained of all color. He looked trapped, a cornered animal, realizing the hunter was someone he had invited into his own den. She's lying. She's unwell, he stammered, trying to pull her away. But Yao Qingqing was committed. She wrenched her arm free. Tears real or manufactured, it didn't matter, streaming down her face. Unwell? Is that what you call it? She screamed, her hand flying to her stomach. I have given you everything. I helped you get rid of her. She gestured wildly in Xu Wanruo's direction. And for what? To be hidden away. You will acknowledge this baby, Liu Jing. You will give us the life you promised me. The narrative shifted in an instant. The story was no longer Xu Wanruo's triumphant return. It was the public implosion of Liu Jing, the celebrated heir, and his unhinged, pregnant fiancée. The vultures of the media were feasting. Xu Wanruo watched the scene with a detached, glacial calm. It was uglier than she had imagined, but also more satisfying. This was the rot at the core of their lives, finally exposed to the light. Just then, her assistant, a sharp young woman named Milin, materialized at her elbow. Her face was pale, her eyes urgent. Miss Xu, she whispered, leaning in close. There's a problem. A big one. My contact at Liu Corp's pier just tipped me off. Liu Jing has photos. Wanruo's blood ran cold. What photos? You and Mr. Shenzichu. From the collaboration meeting in Milan last month. They're innocent, just work photos, but he's had them edited. They're suggestive. He was planning to leak them tonight, right after your speech, to frame you as a vengeful adulteress trying to ruin his engagement. The sheer, unending malevolence of it took her breath away. Even in his downfall, his first instinct was to drag her down with him. For a moment, the old panic flared. He was going to taint her victory, twist her success into something sordid. But then she met Liu Bowen's gaze he had overheard. There was no pity in his eyes, only a simmering, controlled rage on her behalf. And in that moment, she remembered who she was now. She was not a victim to be cornered. She was a strategist. And she had come prepared. A faint, dangerous smile touched her lips. He wants to play with photos, she murmured to Milin. Fine, let's play. Cue the secondary presentation. The one in the contingency folder. Projector. Now, Milin's eyes widened in understanding, a spark of fierce loyalty in them. She nodded once and slipped away. On the stage, the chaos continued. Liu Jing was trying to placate a hysterical Yao Qingqing while security began to close in. He looked up, his desperate eyes scanning the crowd, and found Xu Wanruo. A venomous sneer twisted his lips, a silent threat. You think you've won. Just wait. It was then that the massive LED screens behind the stage, which had been displaying the elegant logo of the Phoenix collection, flickered and changed. A dead silence fell over the hall, projected in high-definition glory for every guest, every journalist, every camera to see. Was not a photo of Xu Wanruo and Shenzichu. It was a crystal-clear image of Yao Qingqing, wrapped in the arms of another man. A man who was very clearly not Liu Jing. They were on a hotel balcony, silhouetted against a sunset, their embrace intimate and passionate. The next photo was even more damning. A close-up of them kissing, her expression one of blissful surrender. A timestamp in the corner dated it just 2 weeks ago. Xu Wanruo stepped forward, her heels clicking decisively on the marble floor. A technician handed her a microphone as if on instinct. Her voice, amplified by the hall speakers, was as cool and clear as ice. It seems there has been some confusion tonight regarding fidelity and truth, she began, her gaze sweeping over the stern faces before landing squarely on Lu Jing. His face had crumpled into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He stared at the screen, then at Yao Qingqing, his mind visibly shattering. For 3 years, Xu Wanro continued, her voice gaining strength. I have lived with the lies that these two people created. They called me unfaithful. They called me a traitor. They took my home, my reputation, and my family's legacy. She gestured to the screen. Mr. Liu, you were worried about photos being leaked tonight. You were right to be. But you had the wrong subject, you see. While you were busy trying to fabricate a new lie to destroy me, you were blind to the very real betrayal happening right beside you. Yao Qingqing's sobs had choked off. She stared at the screen, her face a canvas of horror. Those are fake. They're photoshopped, she shrieked. But there was no conviction in her voice. The truth was there for all to see. Are they? Xu Wanro asked softly, a blade in her tone. Just as the evidence you fabricated against me was fake. It seems the truth has a way of coming out. As for the charge you claim to be carrying, Mr. Liu, I sincerely hope you'll have the wisdom to demand a paternity test. Checkmate, the room erupted. It was no longer a scandal. It was a legend. Lu Jing stood frozen, a statue of humiliation. Yao Qingqing, exposed and abandoned, finally broke, her cries devolving into incoherent wails as security gently but firmly escorted her out. The empire they had built on her tears had crumbled to dust in a single, glorious night. Xu Wanro watched them go, but she felt no elation, only a vast, hollow emptiness where the pain used to be. Justice was not a triumph. It was just of a war. She set the microphone down and turned, her composure finally beginning to fray. Lu Buon was right there. He took her arm, his touch a grounding force. Let's get you out of here, he said, his voice a low anchor in the swirling storm of noise. He guided her through a side exit, away from the ravenous press, leading her up a private elevator to the hotel's rooftop terrace. The cool night air was a balm on her heated skin. Below, the city was a tapestry of glittering lights, distant and serene. The chaos of the party was a muted hum, a world away. She walked to the edge of the terrace, wrapping her arms around herself, a sudden tremor running through her. The fight was over, but the adrenaline left a deep, aching exhaustion in its wake. Lu Buon came to stand beside her, not crowding her, just offering his silent presence. For a long time, neither of them spoke.